My name is Amelia, and I am a creature of quiet spaces and stories whispered on aging paper. For 10 years, my world was the meticulously curated chaos of a San Francisco publishing house, a life of crisp manuscripts and the distant hum of city traffic. But my roots are sunk deep in the damp, fertile soil of Port Blossom, a small town nestled on the Oregon coast where the scent of sea salt and pine needles hangs in the air like a perpetual mist. It's the town where my father, Thomas Blackwood, built his life's work, a bookstore named simply, and with a touch of old-world pride, Blackwood and Sons Books. I suppose he always imagined my older brother, Marcus, would be the one to carry on the name. Life, however, rarely follows the neat narrative arc of the novels my father so loved. His heart, a steady and generous drumbeat in the rhythm of our lives, gave out one rainy Tuesday in April. I came home for the funeral and found myself anchored by the weight of grief and memory, unable to return to my life of concrete and ambition. The bookstore, which I had loved as a child and fled as a young adult, called to me. It was a dusty, hallowed space, but it was also sinking, slowly and gracefully, into obsolescence. The reading of the will was a quiet, strained affair in a lawyer's office that smelled of lemon polish and unresolved tension. My father, in a final act of foresight I was only beginning to understand, had left me the controlling interest in the business. The air crackled. I can still see the look on Marcus's face, a flicker of disbelief hardening into a mask of cold fury. He, who had never left Port Blossom, who had worked by our father's side for 15 years, had been passed over. Our Aunt Clara, my father's sister who had managed the accounts since before I was born, simply folded her hands in her lap, her lips a thin, resolute line. This is not a story of corporate intrigue or calculated revenge. It is a story about family, about the stubborn, tangled roots of love and resentment, and about finding the courage to honor a legacy not by preserving it in amber, but by allowing it to breathe again. And it begins with the day my family decided I was the one thing standing in the way of saving it. 6 months before they handed me the letter, I stood in the heart of Blackwood and Sons and felt the profound stillness of a place beloved but forgotten. The air was thick with the sweet, acidic scent of decaying paper and dust, motes dancing in the slender shafts of light that pierced the gloom. Books were stacked in precarious towers, spilling from shelves and colonizing the floor. It was a labyrinth of stories, a fire hazard, and a financial black hole. Our father had run it on love and intuition, but love doesn't pay the electricity bill, and intuition can't compete with the ruthless efficiency of online retail giants. The ledgers, which Clara kept in elegant, spidery cursive, told a story of dwindling sales and mounting debt. We were a local treasure on the verge of becoming a local memory. My first family meeting was in the small, cramped office at the back, surrounded by faded photographs of a younger, vibrant dad and a laughing, gap-toothed Marcus and me. I had baked my mother's lemon poppy seed loaf, a small offering of peace. I've been going over the financials, I began, my voice softer than I intended. And I've spent the last week just watching. Watching who comes in, what they look for, what they say. Marcus leaned back in Dad's worn leather chair, a proprietary gesture that tightened something in my chest. We know our customers, Leah. They've been coming here for 30 years. They want what we've always had. Some of them do, I agreed gently. But we're not seeing new customers. We're not seeing younger families. The world has changed, and we haven't changed with it. I laid out my proposal, a series of ideas I'd been sketching in a notebook for days. It wasn't a radical demolition, but a careful renovation of the store's soul. A bright, comfortable children's corner to replace the dusty, forgotten alcove. A small, high-quality coffee bar where the overflowing history section currently stood. Author readings, poetry nights, and curated book clubs. An online store, a simple one, so that the summer tourists who fell in love with Port Blossom could continue to support us from afar. Clara, who had been silently sipping her tea, set her cup down with a deliberate click. Thomas would never have wanted a cafe in his bookstore. He said the smell of coffee interferes with the smell of books. Dad also said the most important thing was to put the right book in the right person's hands, I countered. What if a warm, welcoming space with a good cup of coffee is what brings that person through the door in the first place? This isn't San Francisco, Amelia, Marcus said, his use of my full name a clear, sharp jab. You can't just waltz in here with your big city ideas and expect them to work. This is a bookstore, not a community center. Why can't it be both? I asked, my voice filled with a passion that seemed to make them recoil. Why can't it be the heart of this town again? The meeting ended without resolution. The lemon loaf sat uneaten between us. That afternoon, the box of new children's books I'd ordered was nowhere to be found. Must have been a shipping error, Clara said, not meeting my eye. The next day, a carefully scheduled consultation with a local carpenter for the coffee bar was canceled. I told him we weren't ready to make any decisions, Marcus informed me, his tone leaving no room for argument. They weren't overt acts of sabotage. They were small, quiet rebellions, the passive resistance of people deeply rooted in their ways. Emails I sent to the staff about a new inventory system went unanswered. Conversations would cease the moment I entered the staff room. I was the outsider, the usurper, the daughter who had abandoned her post only to return and desecrate the temple. I didn't fight them. Not directly. Instead, I began my work in the quiet corners they had seated. I started with the children's section. Late at night, after they had all gone home, I would stay, fueled by lukewarm tea and a growing sense of resolve. I sorted, dusted, and cleared the space. I painted the grimy wall a soft, sunny yellow. I brought in a small, colorful rug I found at a thrift store and a few beanbag chairs. I curated a collection of beautiful, modern picture books alongside the classics, arranging them with their covers facing out, like miniature works of art. One Saturday, a young mother I didn't recognize wandered in with her daughter. The little girl, who couldn't have been more than 5, gasped and ran straight for the yellow corner. She plopped onto a beanbag chair with a copy of a book I adored. Her mother looked at me, her expression a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "This is wonderful," she whispered. "We never used to come in here." It always felt a bit dark for her. I held that small victory close, a single warm ember in the growing cold. I documented everything. Not in a ledger of grievances, but in my notebook. I tracked the sales from that little corner. I took photos of the children reading. I started a simple Instagram page for the store, posting a picture of the girl on the beanbag, with her mother's permission. The post got 27 likes. It felt like a revolution. I continued, piece by piece. I didn't have the budget for a full cafe, so I partnered with a local roaster. For a small share of the profits, they provided a high-end self-serve coffee machine and their specialty beans. I set it up on a small table with an honesty jar for payment. Clara sniffed at the aroma, her disapproval a tangible presence, but customers began to linger longer, a book in one hand, a warm cup in the other. My attempts to engage my family were met with a wall of polite, unyielding resistance. "Marcus, I was thinking we could host a poetry night with Mr. Abernathy from the high school," I suggested one morning. "He's a good customer, Leah." "Let's not bother him with these things," he replied, turning back to his task of alphabetizing the classics, a job that never seemed to end. I approached him again, a week later. "I found a first edition of East of Eden in the back room. It's in beautiful condition. We could feature it on the website." "We don't have a website," he stated flatly. "I'm building one," I said. He just shook his head and walked away. The tension was a constant, low-grade hum. It was in the shared silence at the lunch table, the way Clara would meticulously recount the day's meager takings with a pointed look in my direction, the way Marcus would helpfully explain the history of a particular section to a customer, implicitly highlighting my ignorance. They believed they were protecting our father's legacy. I believed I was trying to save it. We were both acting out of a form of love, but our loves were at war. I learned to work around them. I held the first book club meeting in my own home. 6 people came. The next month, there were 10. When they got too big for my living room, I started holding them in the store after hours. I paid for the wine and cheese out of my own pocket. I saw the lights on from the street as I drove by one night and saw them talking and laughing, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of what could be. But my small successes only seemed to deepen their resentment. They saw my changes not as signs of life, but as a rejection of everything our father had built. My vision of a vibrant, living bookstore was, to them, a betrayal. Then came the letter. It was a cold, gray November afternoon. The tourist season was long over, and the town had shrunk back to its core residents. Rain lashed against the large front window of the store. They called a family meeting, the formality of it a warning bell. We sat in the office again. This time, there was no lemon loaf. Marcus was the one to speak, his voice devoid of its usual sarcastic edge, replaced by a somber gravity. "Leah, we're worried. We're all worried." He slid a single sheet of cream-colored paper across the desk. "We've been talking. All of us." I picked it up. My hands were steady. The heading read, "A vote of no confidence." Below it was a short, typed paragraph stating that my new direction was causing financial strain and alienating longtime customers, and that for the good of Blackwood and Sons, they were formally requesting I cede operational control to Marcus. Below the paragraph were the signatures. Marcus Blackwood, Clara Blackwood, 2 of my cousins who worked part-time in the summer, 3 of the 4 longtime employees, people who had watched me grow up. A list of names, each one a small, sharp cut. I read each one, my gaze lingering for a moment on Clara's elegant, familiar script. I looked up, meeting Marcus's steady, challenging gaze. I saw no triumph in his eyes, only a deep, painful certainty. He truly believed he was doing the right thing. A part of me wanted to scream, to throw the ledgers at them, to show them the small, upward ticks in sales from the children's corner, the money in the coffee jar, the waiting list for the book club. A part of me wanted to crumble, to give them the keys and flee back to a world where family was just a comforting phone call away. But I thought of the little girl on the beanbag. I thought of the quiet hum of conversation at the book club meeting. I thought of my father and the trust he had placed in me. That trust was not for the daughter he remembered, but for the woman I had become. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my bag. "Thank you for being honest about your concerns," I said, my voice as calm and even as the quiet before a storm. "I will give this the consideration it deserves." I stood up and walked out of the office, past the shelves of silent, waiting stories and into the rain. I did not let them see me break. Instead, I walked down to the stony beach, let the cold wind whip the tears from my eyes, and began to calculate exactly how I would build a future they couldn't see. The 3 weeks that followed the presentation of the letter were the loneliest of my life. The air in the bookstore was thick with a silence that was heavier than any argument. My presence was tolerated, an unwelcome ghost haunting the aisles. Clara would give me polite, one-word answers to my questions. Marcus avoided me altogether, communicating only through terse notes left on the counter. The other employees were kind, but distant, caught in a painful web of loyalty. I did not argue. I did not try to persuade them. I poured all of my energy, all of my grief and frustration and hope into my work. My small, incremental changes had been met with resistance. Now I needed to show them a completed chapter. The holiday season was approaching, our make-or-break period. It would be my closing argument. I worked with a quiet, furious intensity. Late into the night, the bookstore became my sanctuary and my workshop. I finalized the website, a simple, clean interface that showcased the store's charm. I photographed our most beautiful books, writing descriptions that were not just summaries, but invitations. I set up online ordering, a system so simple even Clara could, if she chose, understand it. I planned a holiday relaunch event for the first weekend of December. I designed the flyers myself, using a warm, festive font. I reached out to the local paper, not to the advertising department, but to a young features writer who had written a piece on the decline of small-town main streets. I didn't sell her a story, I told her one. I told her about my father's legacy, about my fear of it vanishing, and about my belief that a bookstore could be a town's anchor. I planned every detail of the event. Mulled cider simmering on a hot plate, filling the store with the scent of cinnamon and cloves, a direct and deliberate challenge to the memory of my father's no smells rule. A local guitarist playing soft, acoustic carols. A story time in the children's corner every hour. A 10% discount for anyone who brought a donation for the local food bank. Marcus watched my preparations with a kind of weary pity. "You're spending money we don't have, Leah," he said one evening, gesturing to the boxes of fairy lights I was untangling. "It's an investment," I replied, my back to him. "It's a fantasy," he muttered, and left. The day of the relaunch arrived, bright and cold. A rare winter sun made the frost on the windows sparkle. I was at the store by dawn, my stomach a knot of anxiety and fragile hope. By 10 a.m., when we were due to open, a small crowd was already waiting outside. My heart hammered against my ribs. People streamed in, their faces lighting up with surprise. "Oh my goodness, it looks so different," I heard one woman exclaim. "It's so bright." The children's corner was an instant hit. The coffee station was busy all day. People lingered, they talked, they browsed. The guitarist's gentle music wove through the cheerful hum of conversation. I saw old, familiar faces, customers from my father's time, but I also saw so many new ones. Young couples, families with toddlers, teenagers who I'd never seen set foot in the store before. Clara, stationed at the old wooden cash register, was stoic, but I saw her hands were moving faster than I'd ever seen them move. Marcus stayed in the back for most of the day, emerging only to reshelve books, his expression unreadable. Late in the afternoon, the young journalist from the paper arrived. I walked with her through the store, pointing out the changes, introducing her to customers. I saw her talking to the mother from that first day in the children's corner. I saw her smiling as she sipped her cider. By the time we closed the doors that evening, we were exhausted. The cash register was full. The donation box for the food bank was overflowing. The store, though slightly disheveled, felt alive. It felt joyful. I stayed late again, cleaning up. Marcus emerged from the office. He didn't look at me, but at the bustling aftermath of the day. "The till hasn't had that much in it in a single day in over 5 years," he said, his voice flat. "I know," I said quietly. He just nodded and retreated back into the office. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. A crack in the wall of his certainty. The climax, however, came a week later. Our accountant, a practical man named Mr. Davies, had called a mandatory end-of-year review to discuss the store's dire financial situation and, I suspected, to formalize the transfer of power Marcus and Clara had requested. We sat in the same cold office. Marcus and Clara looked grim but resolute, ready to deliver the final blow. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, peering at the papers in front of him. "Well, things have been difficult." The numbers through the end of October were tracking towards insolvency by the spring. Marcus shot me a look, a mixture of bitterness and "I told you so." However, Mr. Davies continued, adjusting his glasses. "Something rather remarkable has happened in the last 6 weeks." He slid a spreadsheet across the table. It was a single page, but it told a staggering story. A line graph showing our revenue. For months, it was a gentle, heartbreaking slope downwards. Then, in November, it ticked up slightly. And in the first week of December, it shot upwards like a rocket. "Sales are up 400% over the same period last year," he announced, a note of genuine astonishment in his voice. "The online portal Amelia established has accounted for nearly 30% of that. We have orders from 6 different states. The profit from the coffee service, while small, covers the cost of the store's heating. And foot traffic, well, I've never seen numbers like this." He pushed another paper forward. It was the article from the Port Blossom Chronicle. The headline read, "Not a final chapter, How Blackwood and Sons is Reinventing Itself." The journalist had quoted the young mother, the high school English teacher, and a dozen other customers. She called the store the vibrant, beating heart of a revitalized Main Street. She called my vision a loving tribute that looks to the future instead of the past. The room was utterly silent. I watched as the color drained from Marcus's face. He stared at the article, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the table. Clara was looking at her hands, her stoic composure finally cracking, revealing the bewildered woman beneath. "Furthermore," Mr. Davies said, unaware of the domestic drama unfolding, "I spoke to the bank. Given these results and the positive press, they are willing to reconsider the business expansion loan they denied 6 months ago. They see potential here. He paused, then looked directly at me. On the condition that Amelia remains as director, with full operational control. It wasn't a promotion. It was a confirmation. The validation I had stopped seeking from them had arrived from the outside world, undeniable and stark. I held my brother's gaze. In his eyes, I saw the collapse of his entire worldview, the painful realization that in his quest to protect our father's legacy, he had almost destroyed it. In the aftermath of that meeting, a fragile truce settled over the bookstore. The victory didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy, laden with the weight of what came next. I could have forced them out. The bank's condition had given me the power to dismantle the family dynasty and rebuild it in my own image. I could have accepted their resignations, which I knew would be offered, stiffly and pridefully. But as I stood in the store that evening, long after Mr. Davies had gone, watching the last of the fairy lights blink, I knew that wasn't the story I wanted to write. Firing my family wouldn't be a solution. It would just be a different kind of failure. My father hadn't left me the store to win a war against my own blood. He had left it to me, I was beginning to realize, because he knew I had the strength to build a peace. I called another meeting the next morning. Not in the suffocating office, but out in the main part of the store, in the new seating area by the window. I brought coffee for everyone in mugs, not paper cups. They came in looking defeated, expecting their exile. "I'm not firing you," I said, before they could even speak. The surprise on their faces was palpable. "I don't want to run this store without you. But things do have to change." I looked at Marcus. "The bank gave us a choice, and this is the choice I'm making. I will be the director. My vision for the store is the one we will follow. That is not negotiable." I let that sink in. "But that vision is incomplete without you." I turned to him directly. "Marcus, no one knows classic literature and first editions like you do. Your knowledge is an incredible asset, but it's been buried in the back room. I want you to manage our rare books collection, to develop the online catalog for collectors, to be our expert. Your name is on the sign. I want you to have a role that honors that." His jaw was tight, but he listened. Then I looked at Clara. "Aunt Clara, you are the heart of this place. You know every longtime customer by name. You remember what their children were reading 10 years ago. That connection is priceless. But you're tied to that register. I want you to run our community outreach. I want you to be the face of our new membership program, to plan events for our seniors, to make every person who walks through that door feel as welcome as you've always made me feel, even when we disagreed." I laid out a new structure, a new way of working together. It wasn't a democracy. It was a benevolent dictatorship, one that defined clear roles based on their strengths, not their seniority. I was offering them a place in the new world I was building, a chance to be part of the success instead of an obstacle to it. It was an invitation, not an ultimatum. "I need you to decide if you can work within that structure," I finished. "If you can respect my leadership and be part of this team. The choice is yours." Clara was the first to speak, her voice raspy with emotion. "Your father would be. He would be proud of you, Amelia. And of this place." She looked around the bright, clean store. "Yes, I can do that." Marcus was silent for a long time, studying the worn floorboards. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes clear of the anger that had clouded them for months. "The article, they called it the heart of Main Street," he said quietly. "Dad always wanted that." He took a deep breath. "Okay, Leah. Okay." The months that followed were a gradual thaw. There was no grand, tearful reconciliation. The apology was in the work. It was in the way Marcus came to me one afternoon, genuinely excited, with a proposal for a series on local Oregon authors. It was in the way Clara glowed as she signed up her 20th member for the new loyalty program she had designed herself. The bookstore thrived. The expansion loan came through, and we carefully renovated the second floor into a beautiful event space. We hosted readings that were standing room only. We started a children's story hour that became the highlight of the week for Port Blossom's parents. One rainy afternoon, about a year after the letter, I was shelving books in the poetry section. Marcus came over, holding a copy of a Mary Oliver collection. I was thinking, he said, tapping the cover. Maybe for the next book club. We stood there for 10 minutes, talking about poets, about which collection would resonate most, about who might lead the discussion. We were sharing ideas. We were collaborating. He wasn't deferring to me, he was engaging with me as a partner, as an equal in passion, if not in authority. This is nice, he said suddenly, looking around the bustling store. It feels alive again. It is, I said, and smiled. My story isn't about how I vanquished my enemies. It's about how I learned to redefine the terms of engagement. It's about understanding that behind their resistance was not malice, but fear of change, fear of loss, fear of their own irrelevance. My greatest success wasn't the 400% increase in sales, it was creating a space where my family could let go of that fear and find a new way to belong. I still have the letter. It's tucked away in my father's old desk, not as a trophy of a battle won, but as a reminder. A reminder that legacy isn't a static monument to be guarded, but a living thing that needs air and light to grow. It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound acts of love are the ones that require us to gently but firmly tear down the old walls to let the sun in. And it's a reminder that a family, like a beloved old bookstore, can be saved, not by clinging to the past, but by having the courage to write a new chapter together.